welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
After many years on this program, from time to time, we do a subject we've never done before. You would think that we've run out of subjects, but there are too many to ever do that. Today we want to talk about retirees in relation to choosing another country to live rather than the United States, but they're citizens of the United States. Our guest made that decision. She decided to go to Mexico to live, and she is home visiting before she returns to her new place of living, and that is in Mexico. She is a former member of our staff at North Idaho College. Our guest is Joe Marinovich. She was the health nurse here for years, and we're so happy to welcome her back. She retired last year, and as I indicated, she chose to go to Mexico to live. And so our subject today will be, what should you do if you make such a decision? How should you prepare? And what should you anticipate on this new endeavor? Joe, it's a pleasure having you on our program, and as a good friend, it's nice to see you home.
Thank you, Tony.
I'm very happy to have two panel members today to question our guests. First to my left is Margaret Fedge. Margaret Fedge is a member of the counseling staff at North Idaho College and active in many community affairs. And next to her is Steve Schenck, who is the Dean of College Relations and Development at North Idaho College. And since Margaret is a very personal friend of Joe, I would like to ask her to commence the questioning.
Thank you, Tony. Joe, why did you choose Mexico? Our idea, for many of us, when we think of Mexico, are peasants walking around with leading little burros around and taking afternoon siestas. How did you come to choose Mexico?
Well, I had several reasons. One is the climate. I happen to like to get up in the morning and have the sun shining and the birds singing and the flowers blooming. And in January, that's a little hard to do around here, so I thought I'd probably go someplace else for that. Number two, it's close to the U.S. So if I did have to get back here, the airfare wouldn't be so out of reason that I couldn't return. Another thing I thought of was I've always wanted to travel, and I took early retirement, and it's I'm on quite a tight budget. I don't have much money to travel, and so I thought, where's the closest place that there would be a lot of culture and a lot of different cultures, and Mexico fits that bill. There are all kinds of Indian cultures, the Aztecs, the Mayans, the Tarascans, and then the Spanish influence, and a lot of buildings down there that were built in the 15, 16, 1700s. There's a lot of history, and I like to people watch. It's fun to sit on the park bench in the Jardín and watch the Mexicans and watch the tourists. Another thing I thought of was I like the arts, and I enjoy music and art openings, things like that, and there's a lot of that down there, so those were my reasons.
This is not sounding like our typical stereotype picture of Mexico that you're talking about.
Oh, no. The Mexicans are warm, friendly people. They like to have you learn Spanish, and they like to have you try. Even if you bumble around a little, they'll really they get into it, and they correct you, and they help you with words, and they're really neat people. They're very enjoyable and very patient with the gringos.
Steve Schenck.
Joe, let me add my welcome to Tony's. It's good to see you again, and I hope you enjoy your short stay with us here before you go back to your new home.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm tempted to get into the question of how someone does as you did and retires at such a very young age, but we may save that for another show and focus our attention on Mexico. We talked for just a minute before we started the show today, and you mentioned, I believe, that you're now living in a town called San Miguel de Allende, is that correct?
Yes.
How did you choose that? We talked a little bit about why Mexico, but how did you find a little town, at least I'm presuming that it's small because I'd never heard of it before. How did you find that particular community?
I chose San Miguel because it's a city of 70,000 people. 15,000 of them are gringos. They're from the United States. We're all Americans, I guess. They're from the United States, they're from Canada, and they're from Europe. So I have friends. There are a lot of Germans down there. I have friends who are Swiss, Dutch, French, English. So I've met people from all over the world down there in San Miguel. And it's an easy place to sort of start off.
Well, now that's an extremely large non-Mexican population.
Yeah.
Are there other communities that you're aware of that share that high foreign population, or is San Miguel somewhat unique?
Well, Guadalajara has the most U.S. citizens outside of the United States of any city in the world. So they have 60,000 in a population of 6 million. And then Lake Chapala, which is close to Guadalajara, is almost all Americans. So there are some that, but I think you need enough Mexicans so you keep the flavor of the country. Otherwise, you might as well be living in Southern California.
And yet San Miguel has a higher percentage population of non-Mexican residents than Guadalajara does.
Yeah.
What has established that as such a second home for foreigners?
Well, they have 2 art institutes there, the Bellas Artes and the Instituto. And very early on, they got the GI Bill down there, and so veterans could go down there and go to school. They also have language schools. They've got 4 language schools there. And there is a colony of artists, and writers are down there, and quite a few people that do things. You know, they always ask me what I do, and I say, I just enjoy what you do.
If Tony will permit me one more follow-up question, I'm remiss for not having placed San Miguel de Allende for the audience. Where is this town that you're living in now, in Mexico?
Okay, it's about 3.5 hours on the bus north of Mexico City. So it's in the high plains, and it's eternal spring. The temperatures range from 70 to 80 during the daytime and 40 to 50 at night. It's dry, and it's a little more arid than Coeur d'Alene, but it's pretty.
I can just hear a couple speaking in their living room, many of them saying, now we've got to go. Joe Marinovich has convinced us it's time to retire and it's time to move to Mexico, and you made it sound so exciting. But there are also some problems. How do you prepare? In other words, you can't just pack your suitcase today and be in Mexico to live for the rest of your life. Would you do 2 things for us? Would you talk about the preparations, once you've made a decision to do that, to go to a country like Mexico? And I particularly would like for you, secondly, to emphasize what are the legal processes that you must go through in order to do that.
Okay. To prepare, I think you should start 10 years before you retire, or even 5 years. I just started 1 year before I retired. It worked out all right, but you need to go down there on vacations. If you can spend a month there, that would be great. See if you like it. Some people do not like. I don't think that Mexico. I don't think of Mexico as a third world country, maybe a second world. But anyway, some people do not like the poverty. They do not like dirt. And you know, it isn't like the United States. It's a different place. So you've got to see if you can live with that. And you've got to see if you can like the people. You also need to talk to the retirees down there and say, you know, what do you do about banking? What do you do about precautions to your water? You know, and you have to prepare all these things. You can there's all kinds of retirement books out. Living Easy in Mexico, How to Retire on $400 a Month in Mexico. There's just an awful lot of literature out on it, so you need to, you know, get 1 or 2 of those and check it out. Then on the legal side, you go in first on a tourist visa, and you can stay for as long as 6 months on a tourist visa, and then you have to go up to the border. Now, if you bring your car in, you have to take that up to the border too, because it gets its own sticker. And so it has to go to a border before you can turn around and come back. So if you don't like the hassle of that, some people live there for 30 years on tourist visas and just come up. You just have to go out of the country twice a year. You don't have to come up to the U.S. border necessarily. But if you want a more permanent status, You go, there's an FM2 and an FM3, the immigrante status and immigrado. Immigrado, you can work, you can bring your furniture in, you can do a lot of things. But each one of those things really requires a lawyer and a lot of preparation. So I think you even have to get a letter from the mayor of your town saying that you are a honest, upright, outstanding human being, and anyway, and then a doctor's certificate, and there's just a whole.
You're from a large city, you might not be able to get the mayor's signature
well, yeah.
because they don't know all the citizens. I'm sure Mayor Stone would give you a letter, Joe.
Thank you.
But I think we should have one more question, and then I'll go back to Margaret. But you've talked about two different statuses, but what's the difference? I know you take the one where you have to come out every 6 months. What's the advantage of having one over the other one?
Well, on the FM2 and the FM3, you have to bring a certain amount of money into the country, and it is converted into pesos. Okay, the peso devalues every once in a while. So, if you're not, don't feel real good about changing your American dollars into pesos and just leaving them there in the bank, you might not want to do it that way. There are actually 15 different statuses you can go for, and but the FM2 and the FM3 are the most popular.
Thank you.
Ones I've heard.
Margaret Fadge.
I'm going to follow up on the money concerns question. Can you talk about, for those in our audience who may not be familiar, what is the unit of money in Mexico, and what is it worth compared to a U.S. dollar, and a little bit about how stable is the economy. You talked a little bit about banking. Can you just sort of elaborate on that whole money concern issue?
Okay. The unit is peso, and 2,770 pesos make a dollar. So when you're spending money down there, you're into the thousands and the millions, and it's scary, and you think, oh my word, what have I done? I've blown the budget. But then you figure it out in dollars, and it's not bad at all.
I can't resist interrupting to say it's a way to become worth over $1 million.
Oh, yes,
yes. To move to Mexico.
1 million pesos is about $400.
Oh, then congratulations on being a millionaire.
Then banking, the stability first. They are devaluing each month, and the president of Mexico now is devaluing a little bit at a time. I think when I went down there, it was 2,540 pesos to the dollar. But anyway, he's doing it month by month. He does a little bit instead of at 2 times during the past few years. It's just gone down to almost half, and it's hard on the Mexicans to have their money devalued like that. So I think probably it's more stable now than it has been in a while. On banking, it's difficult to know what to do about getting your money down there. I think the best way is with traveler's checks. I take enough down for 6 months and then just change them as I need them. You can put some money into Mexican banks. It's about 40% interest, but again, you don't know when they're going to devalue. You can use your Visa card. That's just up to the minute. That tells you the moment it comes in. That's what they, your dollar is taken right at that level. So, but those 3 things I think are probably the best ways.
Steve Sheen.
Joe, I was intrigued by your description of the different levels of visitor status that someone considering a move to Mexico might pursue. But on a more basic level, what's the attitude of the Mexican government toward people like you? Do they encourage the kind of relocation that you've just done?
I think they do. It's getting easier for Americans to go into business down there, and this has all come about just within the last 6 months. Still, if you get your tourist visa on the border, sometimes the border people will only give you a 3-month visa. And that's okay because you can go to the consulate when you get there and get a 3-month extension. But if you do want a full 6 months, it's best to go to the consulate nearest you, and here it's Seattle, I think. in the Mexican consulate. But so I don't know for sure, really, how all of them feel about it. But I think they like to have the dollars down there, and it's pretty tough. Their economy is pretty tough, so they like all the help they can get.
What about the Mexicans in your community who make up the majority of that 70,000 population? How do they feel about that heavy foreign presence in their town?
Most of them are, I've met some wonderful Mexican people, and they don't seem to mind it. There are a few that do, but you've just got to remember that perhaps the last person they met wasn't a very nice American, and so it has nothing to do with you, so you just, let it go. And you do what you can to help. The Americans have a lot of charities down there and work with handicapped kids. They work with, there's an English, Spanish library, and they do a lot of teaching English to Mexican kids, and hoping that maybe it will make their life a little easier, in the long run. So they do a lot of good things down there, and I'm kind of proud of the people that are down there.
Do you have an opportunity to put your skills as a registered nurse to work?
No, on a tourist visa you can't.
Not even on a volunteer basis?
Yeah, on a volunteer basis you could, but I need to know the language a little bit better before you get into some life and death stuff, and when you don't know as much Spanish as you'd like, well, it's kind of dangerous. So
I'd like to talk something about health care. When you go, there are some differences from one region of the world to another one that deals with foods and water, so forth. What recommendations would you have for those from our country that might move there in preparing food and drinking water and so forth?
You don't drink the water. That's the first rule. No, the Mexicans don't drink the water without it being boiled. You boil it for 1 hour, and you're worried about amoebas. So you just boil them right up there, and you get used to it. After a while, you wouldn't think of, drinking out of a tap, or and you have your big pail right there next to the stove, and then you have a little jar in the bathroom for your toothbrush, and you have your cold drinking water in the refrigerator. When you bring fruits and vegetables in from the market, you soak them for 20 minutes in Clorox and water, and again for the amoebas. They say it's not good to eat the strawberries. Strawberries are grown in black water, which is sewage water. And anything that you can peel is pretty safe, but if something like a strawberry, it's just better not to eat them. If you're not sure about the restaurant, you don't eat the lettuce. You can always ask them if they purify their vegetables and if they purify their drinking water. And most restaurants, especially in San Miguel, where there are so many Americans, they do very well with.
And when you talked about the soaking of certain items, that doesn't leave a certain kind of taste.
No, not. We were using iodine, silver and iodine solution, and you'd put 5 drops in and into a liter of water and soak the vegetables in that. But the Mexican government just came out and said, we don't do it anymore. And boy, when they say you don't do it that day. They just take everything off the shelves, and they used to say that was better even than the Clorox for purifying vegetables, but soaking vegetables. But now we're back to Clorox. So.
Okay. Margaret, thank you.
I'd like to continue on the health concerns issue. Many people who are considering retiring to Mexico might have some health concerns. Can you tell us something about the health care down there? Are there qualified medical personnel? Is there up-to-date equipment in hospitals? And what's it like, and what does it cost? And can you tell us a little bit about health care?
Okay, one thing, Medicare does not cover you when you're out of the country. So you have to have another type of health insurance if you go down, if you're over 65. otherwise, it's sort of the same as this country. You know, of course, in Sandpoint there isn't the hospital facilities that there are in Spokane, but still, you know, they're good. So Mexico City has good facilities. Guadalajara has good facilities. Both of them have medical schools. San Luis Potosi is the closest place to San Miguel that has good medical facilities. The doctors are bilingual. They have CAT scans. They have everything. Everything is a lot cheaper. A doctor's visit is 30,000 pesos, which is about $12. Another thing, you can go into the pharmacies and pick up almost anything without a prescription except narcotics, if they have it. But if you're on a really high-powered drug that just came out here in the States, probably they won't have it down there in their pharmacies. You'd have to look a long time to find it. So you'd better be prepared and bring your own prescription with you, you know, until you find out what there is down there. But I think the doctors are good. Even in San Miguel, one of our doctors is bicultural. He grew up in Vermont and then went to med school down in Mexico City and married a girl and decided to stay in Mexico. So he's bicultural. And so I think I haven't seen any poor medical care as yet.
Are there any kinds of medical plans that you can get down there if you chose not to buy a U.S. Health insurance plan and go to Mexico with it? Is there something you can purchase down there as a foreigner in their country?
Yes. They have prepaid medical plans, and it costs you about $400 a year, and it covers you completely. And then if you don't use it within the year, then you are entitled to a full medical exam. And so I think it's a good deal.
Steve Schenck.
Joe, what's been the hardest thing for you to adjust to in your new home?
Oh, probably the mail system. The mail system is a little iffy. Sometimes you don't always get your mail, and it's difficult. We have courier services going out, so anytime one of the Americans goes up to the border, they take a packet of mail with them. And so it's going out probably 3-4 times a week. But coming back in, then it's through the Mexican mail systems. And I haven't received at least 3 letters that I know of so far. So it's always iffy. You're always wondering if you're getting all of it. But there are ways to get around it, I guess.
On the opposite side of the scale, what's been the most pleasant surprise for you?
Oh, I think that the people that choose to live down there, they are just wonderful. The Americans that come down, there's a lot of single women in their 50s and 60s, and they're just really bright, articulate people that are interested in everything, and there's just you're proud of the Americans that are down there. Of course, they have to have a sense of humor, and they have to be patient, and they have to love to travel, and they have to like to people watch, and those are probably the 4 things that you have to like to do in order to be down there.
Now, you've obviously traveled just to get to your new home in San Miguel, but what about other travel opportunities? Have you been pretty much consumed with the task of setting up a new home in a new country, or have you had a chance to visit other parts of Mexico since you made your move?
I've visited other parts. When I first went down there, I went to Guadalajara, and I went to San Miguel, and I went to Morelia and Pátzcuaro. They're all colonial cities in that high plain.
Colonial cities meaning?
Meaning Spanish colonial cities. They're rich in history, and they're San Miguel is on the National Register, so you can't change any of the outsides of any of the buildings. And it's cobblestone streets, and it's very picturesque. But the one I like probably best is Pátzcuaro, and it's more like Coeur d'Alene. It's in Michoacan, and it's wooded and hills and a big lake, and it's gorgeous.
I see.
In our own country, we've had over the years a rise in crime, and particularly our large cities, and sometimes at night in particular it's difficult to move around in the city. And I know at times you are by yourself. You have other friends, and you have another friend that's from here. Compare that with our own country, particularly the larger cities. How safe do you feel as you move around, and particularly in the evening?
I think I probably feel safer in Mexico. Their crimes down there are robbery, pickpockets, things like that. There's very little murder or rape. So actually, but after about 9:30 at night, I usually take a cab home. I don't walk. And I don't walk in the areas of the taverns, because they get kind of crazy when they drink. They're kind of like, so you just stay away from that, because that's when they pull the knife on their best friend, and do things that aren't thought out. But actually, I feel safer, I think, down there than I do, say, in Seattle or New York City or any place.
Margaret Fetchy.
Well, my background is in languages, and I was intrigued by one of the comments you made about you weren't going to use your nursing skills, at least not until your Spanish got a little better. Mm-hmm. What about people who want to go to Mexico who indeed do not speak Spanish? Can they get along? What about the people they would run into? Can people speak English, or are they going to have to learn Spanish? And how do you get information if you're not an English speaker and you want to know what's going on in the world while you're in Mexico?
It's better if you do speak Spanish. I took a conversational course here at the college before I went. Then I could ask the questions. I didn't always understand the answers, but they tend to be a little talkative, and it's a little difficult to understand them sometimes. But anyway, I feel that Spanish for me will be an ongoing thing. It'll probably take me years to get the verbs all down and everything, but I think that you miss so much when you don't speak Spanish. You can get along without it. There are people who live there for 15, 18 years and don't speak a word of Spanish, but they miss a lot. And especially in San Miguel, there's always somebody to help you out. If you're just really stuck, somebody will come up, and lots of Mexicans have been up here, so they'll come up and ask you if they can help you, and so there's always somebody that can help. But you still miss a lot if you don't learn it.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're out of time. It's been a delight to have you here, Joe, and we, again, are happy to see you, and we wish you well as you return to Mexico, and I thank the panel for their fine questions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed our program talking about the decision of retiring and living in Mexico. I would like to invite you to be with us next week at the same time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.